magistrate. I held that position for a few years and then was appointed senior magistrate. And then my leadership roles within that environment, I was immediately deployed as head of the civil courts. And at that stage, the case management systems were being developed and put into place for the criminal courts. So the chief magistrate asked whether I could look at these civil courts, see how they performed, and if it was possible to start a case management system for the civil courts, which is what I did. And within a few months of my being deployed there, I devised a system for civil case management, which worked very well. And then I was taken to the family courts. They were not performing very well. And the chief magistrate again asked me to please put in place some sort of management of that section, of that division, which I did. And it went from being not such a good functioning division to one of the best in the country, to the point that I was then invited to address family court magistrates from around the country to say what we did in Durban to turn it around. And that's what I did. Also with the civil courts, there was a joint initiative, I think, between the Rules Board and Justice College, where again I was asked to address civil magistrates and senior magistrates in charge of civil divisions throughout the country on what we did, how it worked, and any assistance or advice that I could give. And I understand that the video that was made at that workshop was actually used in Justice College's training of newly appointed magistrates. And then from there, I also then managed the criminal courts for a few months until one of the senior magistrates retired. Now, our chief magistrate at that time, because the Durban cluster was so big, he created an internal position of deputy head of office. And then after a few months, he invited me to actually be his deputy, which I did from 2011 until I was appointed to the High Court bench. And in that position, I would obviously fit in wherever the chief magistrate, I was in charge of the Durban cluster. So things like leave and statistics and so on was all what I was responsible for. And then we had the forerunner to the PEEC was the PIJF, which is the Provincial Integrated Justice Forum, which was chaired by the JP of our province. I often attended those meetings and stood in for the chief magistrate because I would prepare the report from my cluster. All the monthly stats and so on would come to me, and I was then obliged to prepare the report on stats and courts and management for that month. So often the chief magistrate would ask me to please attend the PIJF meetings on his behalf, which is what I did, and I interacted with all the role players who are, I think, pretty much the same now at the PEEC level. So that was my leadership roles as far as the magistracy was concerned in a nutshell. At the High Court, well, I sit at the moment on the IT committee with Judge Daffiu, and I've acted for 3.5 terms as DJP. I'm currently acting as the DJP as well. And that's been a very enriching experience. My JP and I get on exceptionally well. Well, we've walked a very long road. He and I have known each other since 1999. We've been through lots of trainings, diversity, social context, leadership training. So we walk a long road. We think very similarly, and we interact extremely well. His views and the manner in which he deals with matters coincides very much with mine. We're both very direct in dealing with problems. We do not like problems festering. So as soon as we're aware of a problem, we call in the parties that are involved, hear out what is their view? Why has this situation arisen? And then we resolve it and move on. So I think from that point of view, um, we would work well together. In the times that I have acted as DJP, I've had no challenges. The JP interacted very well. He's often called away at short notice to meetings and other commitments. So he would simply send me a WhatsApp or call me and say, listen, I can't come in tomorrow. And I'd say, no problem. What is it that you were supposed to do? Tell me what it is, and I'll get it done. And I did without any problems at all. Then outside of my judicial work, with the organizations that I was involved in, initially with JOASA, which is the Judicial Officers Association of South Africa. I was a provincial chairperson, I was on the National Executive Committee, and I held various positions in that organization as well, including representing the organization at overseas conferences. And then with the IAWJ, the South African chapter, I am one of the founding members. I was the very first vice president of publications way back in 2004, and I'm still very actively involved. Within the organization, I was on the executive for 10 years and held various leadership positions there. One of our big projects was the combating human trafficking, where we secured a loan, a grant of, I think, 1.2 million or so from the US State Department, and I project managed that project very successfully. Our mandate, for instance, was 3 workshops nationally, train 6 or 7 judicial officers to be trainers, and bring out a manual, maybe 30 copies or so. We finally managed, with the way I managed the finances and the project, the rollout of the project, we've eventually held 6 workshops nationally. One trained, the trainers workshop, we trained 30 judicial officers nationwide to be trainers in combating human trafficking. We then brought out a manual and we printed 600 copies, not 60 copies, but 600 copies, so that every magistrate who participated in this and other stakeholders each had a copy of that manual. I was also one of the contributors to that manual, and our president has now initiated the updating of that manual, and I'm on that committee as well. So within the organization there were several leadership positions, and we achieved a lot as an organization in that time, and I would like to think that I contributed to that in the leadership positions that I was in that organization. And then other than that, the law, race and gender unit, which I was talking about, my JP and I were both.
I think it'll come out. You've said a mouthful or more than a mouthful. Other issues will come out as colleagues put questions to you. Let's park it there for now. Over to you, JP Musi.
Thank you, CJ. Afternoon, Judge Naidoo.
Good afternoon, JP.
I want to preface my questions with a comment that you and I have discussed the issues that I'm going to deal with. And the first issue is, you're aware of the negative comments by the office manager.
Yes.
You have responded to that.
I have.
Do you want to add anything at this stage to that? To your
I
comments?
think I've covered it fairly extensively, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Now, the second issue is your questionnaire you completed on the 23rd of November 2020.
Yes.
And on the questionnaire, to the question whether you had any reserved judgments at that stage, you answered none. And when I looked at my list of reserved judgments, you had 3 at that stage. 2 of them 78 days old, and the one about 46 years old. None of them older than 3 months. we discussed the issue, and I also informed you that I will have to ask you the question and you will have to respond there to at this forum. Would you mind to give us a response?
Yes, the judgments were ready, and I was on circuit at the time when I completed the questionnaire, and I was returning, I think, the following week. The judgments were ready. I had sent them electronically to a colleague. And just before it got delivered, I realized that there was a whole section that I had omitted to put into that judgment. So I had to call a colleague and say, please just hold that judgment because there's something that needs to be amended. That's how it was not delivered when it was supposed to have been delivered. And I then corrected it subsequently and handed out the judgment. It was an important point, well, not important, but one of the points that was raised and which I'd omitted. And it was only after I sent it to a colleague to hand down when I realized that that was an omission which I had to correct. So that was what had happened there.
Thank you, Judge Naidoo. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, JP. Honorable MEC.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Good day, Judge Naidoo.
Good day, Missy.
I don't know whether Judge President was referring to the complaint that is entailed in the package
Yes, he is.
in his first question.
Mhm.
I still want to take it further
Yes.
because it says, you said you have responded, but I still want to take it further, Judge Naidoo, because I note that you are very well recommended by different associations.
Yes.
And I think sitting here, you do represent gender transformation as a woman. But I do have a worry really, where I will seek that to maybe explain further what happened. The worrying factor for me that I wish for you to clarify is, are you the kind of person who does not appreciate collective decision making, or do you appreciate collective decision making? Are you the kind of person who will override and disregard others if you think that you are right in what you believe in? I'm raising this against that complaint because it seems as if you didn't even care whether those interviews are going to collapse or what. You only believed in what you believed in, and you wanted to achieve what you wanted to achieve against the collective that was working with you on that day. I feel like you disregarded everyone, and ultimately the interviews collapsed.
Well, I think my response to that clarifies that. And certainly, I am definitely not one of these kinds of people coming from the background that I do, who would simply ride roughshod over anybody. And certainly, I've worked on committees and I appreciate how they work. And I've led committees such as that, because in KZN, being in the position that I was, I would sit on interview committees like that. And I must just allay that perception immediately. I'm certainly not that type of person. The way it was represented, that is why I say I answered that in my response, that it was not correctly reported, the way it happened. And I set out what had happened. I certainly did not disregard. I suggested a way where we could give a person who has potential, a woman who has potential, to try and accommodate her if we could. And that is the basis on which that was done. Not to, the concern there was, well, if we deferred the shortlisting, we'd prejudice other candidates. And as you would have seen from my response, I said, if we then accommodate all candidates who meet every other requirement except the driver's license? Would that not prejudice them? And how many are there? They were not able to tell me because they just saw learner's license on everyone and simply rejected them. So I said, but shouldn't we think creatively to give somebody, a woman who's obviously got the potential, who's prepared to put in the work, an opportunity to better herself? And I said, I'm not saying we should, but can you do it? The immediate response of the court manager was, no, we can't do it. And I said, but why? If you do what I suggest, would you be prejudicing anybody? And they didn't answer. I said, well, can you find out from somebody in authority if that is possible? If not, that will be the end of the matter. And that's how I left it. And I said, if it can't be, I expected them to come back and say, no, we can't. I said, well, in that case, then let's carry on with the process. That would have been my reaction. But there was absolutely no feedback. And then months later, I was told that the position is being re-advertised. So I was delighted because I thought, okay, this was debated and the powers that be took a decision. And that was the sum total of my involvement in that.
But at the time, the license was a requirement in your,
The driver's
Mark.
license was one of the requirements in the advert.
okay.
And several candidates applied with a learner's license. And this particular lady who was acting, as I said, she was a stenographer and was acting as my secretary, could not get an appointment before that shortlisting process or before the advert, I think, for a driver's license. She only managed to get it, I think, 2 or 3 days later. Hence, I said, she meets all other requirements. Is it possible? If it's not, it's not. I would accept that.
Now, how, sorry, how are the relations now with your colleagues? Have they mended? And if they have mended, who took the first step to ensure that you
You
are
mean
able
with
to?
the court manager?
Yes.
I've never had a bad relationship with her, and that is why I was so astounded at what she had written. She's always been extremely polite, friendly, and courteous towards me, and I to her, to this day. I encountered her coming into work one morning last week. I think it was last week. We both park in the basement parking. She came in as I was walking away from my car, and she greeted me very friendly, and so did I. I returned it. I've never had a bad relationship with her. And to this day, and as I said, I was astounded when I saw this letter from her, which troubles me somewhat because I would have expected her to approach me and say, I'm not happy with the way you did this. And we would have sorted out, or at best or worst, go to the JP and say, I don't like the way Judge Naidoo handled that, so that I'm aware that that situation is a problem. Because if I was aware that it's a problem, I would most definitely have done something to resolve it, because we have to work with each other on a daily basis. And if there's, you may well have heard that ours is a very, very tightly operated ship. Our division functions really like a well-oiled machine. So if I was aware that this was a problem, my immediate reaction, and as I said, I'm very direct in dealing with problems and resolving them. I would have attended to this long ago. But it's not too late. Now that it is, I'm aware, and I've also been made aware of the unfortunate circumstances she has to work in. So it makes me understand what she might have been going through. And for me, the lesson is, and I hope I'll be able to sit down with the JP and work this out, we obviously need to improve communication at that level. But looking at her circumstances, I understand now that perhaps she didn't feel that she had a safe environment to come forward earlier, just given what she's going through in her space. And I understand that now. So what I resolved is to actually engage with her and try and resolve this situation, because it's not only going to affect me and her, it's going to affect our office. I mean, other judges may well have the same problem, and obviously I need to resolve it so she understands what ought to have been done in the situation. So communication for me, I think, is the lesson that we need to attend to now, and also to hear her out on what her perception was of my behavior. Maybe I unwittingly said or did something, and if I'm aware of it, I can correct it going forward, just so that I can improve relations and keep the harmony of the office going. It is a very harmonious environment we work in, and sometimes, you have these problems and they need to be resolved. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Thank you, Judge Naidoo.
Thank you, MEC.
Thank you, Honorable MEC. Colleagues, are there colleagues who have questions for the Honorable Judge?
Lucas,
Matonzela.
Makwanisha.
Matolo,
Please, it's
Slow down.
Honorable Lucas, Advocate Madonsela, followed by
Makwanisha.
Tepe,
Barnard,
Thing.
I said Dodovu if you didn't pick it up, CJ.
I've got you here, Honorable Dodovu. Thank you. Honorable Lucas.
And JP Mlambo, CJ, please. Thank you.
thank you very much, Chief Justice. Good morning, Judge Naidoo.
Morning, Commissioner.
And thank you.
Good afternoon.
Is it afternoon already? So in actual fact, I'm glad that I'm getting this opportunity immediately after the MEC have spoken, because one of the issues that I wanted to ask with regards to the very same issue is the issue of how you dealt with the perception. Because if I read the document, I can see that there is a perception that you just wanted to get whatever you wanted
Correct.
without taking into account
Yes.
what is the circumstances. But also Chief Justice is really hammering on the issue that we need to save money, and we need to look at the current economic circumstances.
Yes, correct.
And through the handling of this thing, I'm sure there is a case to make out for unauthorized or wasteful expenditure. What is your take thereon?
Well, that's exactly my point. I did not even think of re-advertising for that very reason. And that is the, it's like when you say the rules are there for the court is not there for the rules. You apply the rules so that you achieve fairness, you achieve equity. Simply, that was my thinking. Is there a way we can accommodate a stenographer who has shown such potential, who has shown such dedication? The only thing she didn't meet was the driver's license, which is, it wasn't essential at that stage for what a good secretary was supposed to be. And I said, in order not to prejudice others, let's shortlist all of the people who met every other requirement except that. And who knows, by the time they're interviewed, they may well, like I know the lady in question, would have had her driver's license. If it was not possible, that would have been the end of the matter. I only had to be informed that it's not possible. And then the process would have carried on. But it didn't work out like that. And I don't know what happened behind the scenes, because I was not involved in the process after that. I was simply told about 4, 5 months or 6 months later that it's being re-advertised. And my perception was that it was debated because it took so long for them to come back, and resolved with the authorities that are involved in this. So most definitely, I'm very conscious of cost cutting and saving money, and that comes not from now, it comes from my background in the magistrates court as well.
Let me just ask the second question. Both of the areas of complaint
Sorry, both?
Both of the areas of complaint that is there, I'm not going into the merits of the issue, but it seems as if there is a communication issue.
It is.
And I
yes.
think that is what I would love to elaborate more on as to how you are as a leader going to
Yes.
deal with the issue of addressing to make sure there is, in actual fact, ways for junior staff to raise issues with you, that there is an open line of
Yes.
communication, if we can get to that.
Well, I thought we had that open line because I have that open communication with everyone else, all other senior members of our admin component. I thought I did. And as I said, it was a bit of a shock when I got this, and I couldn't reconcile that letter with the court manager's interactions with me because, as I said, they were always, and even to this day, always very courteous, friendly, polite. So I couldn't reconcile that, and that's what made me um, realize that one needs to have a proper line of communication, which I thought was in place, but clearly not. So in respect of her, at any rate. And that's what I intend to do. I intend to engage with her. Let us both air what we have felt and how she feels, and together work out how we would take it forward. But I would also like to engage with the JP to see that generally there is a line of communication that we put in place. So this is not repeated in the future.
Just for a small follow-up, CJ, I don't want to elaborate on the other issue because I see there is an ongoing investigation. And I think it was put for the record that there is an ongoing investigation.
Yes.
So that was the other issue that I wanted to say something about, but we can leave it there and satisfied. Thank you,
Thank you.
Justice Naidoo, and thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Honorable Lucas. Advocate Madonsela SC.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Judge Naidoo.
Good
Soma
afternoon.
Naidoo, can I call you Soma?
Yes,
Naidoo?
of
You used to call
course.
each other those
Well,
days.
we come a long way. Of course you can.
Yes, nice seeing you after a long time.
Yes, you too.
Yes, Judge Naidoo. Now I should call you that. I see you might be 65 years now.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
You might be 65 years. now.
64.
64. Yes, 64. Yeah. Now, I wanted to. Now, when do you become eligible for retirement? And I ask so that I can ask one question, then we can deal with them at once. I ask because I'm just struggling to see what will be the long-term plan that can be achieved with appointing you in the position of JP in circumstances where we are just about to retire.
Oh, no, not just about two. It's just a little, about 6.5 years is when I will retire.
And then if that is the case, then what plan have you got? What can you do in the remaining years as the DJP? And how should we factor that in the ways that we wish to plan for the succession of the leadership in the Free State? That's my question.
Well, I think we discussed this at the office, and the JP was, we acknowledge that we have a very young bench. I think at the moment I'm the fifth most senior person, fifth most senior judge, and the second most senior female judge in the division. When you talk about what can I do, I have got to this stage of my life and I have accumulated a great deal of experience. My work with the IAWJ and with the Law Race and Gender Unit entailed a lot of mentoring and mentorship, skills that we as facilitators develop in imparting and developing others. And that is, for me, key to the proper functioning of any organization. And that is one of the key roles that I would play, other than supporting the JP in the proper running of the division, um, aligning with his vision, but also trying to discuss with him new ways. While we're such a well and good functioning unit, there's always room for improvement. So that is where I hope to come in, that I will supplement and complement his vision and also help him to take that forward, but improving all the time. So to be his eyes and ears, for instance, with areas where we can improve, we can tweak our functioning. So that's the one thing that my experience will give me. And the second leg of that is to upskill those who follow. We do it informally now anyway. You know, the more recently appointed judges do come to me for assistance, especially with legal issues, operational issues, and so on. But to be able to do that is to impart that knowledge to them, not just for my benefit, but for their benefit as well. You can't teach without learning. And just on that point, you know, I read some years ago about this concept of dying empty, and I couldn't understand what that was. And I read a little more, and it says,
Dying what?
dying empty.
Oh, empty.
There's no point in accumulating knowledge and experience and going to the grave with it. You should give it back to empower and develop other people so that by the time you die, you would have emptied a lot of that knowledge into somebody else who's going to follow you.
I wish we can live longer. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Madonsela. Commissioner Matelo Lepu.
Thank you, CJ. Good afternoon, Judge.
Good afternoon.
So one of the things I just wanted to know, you know, the MEC spoke about issues that touched me on social development. Yeah? So, and I'm just wondering because Free State, the language barrier, I just want to know how many languages can you speak? If
Well,
you have to be of assistance to the issues that you raise.
I don't think I understood the question.
No, what I'm saying is that how many languages can you speak? Yeah.
Oh, that I can speak. Well, I speak English, Afrikaans, my vernacular. I understand a lot of Zulu because I come from KZN. I've been trying to learn Sotho, but then COVID interrupted that. But I must say I understand a lot more in the 7-8 years that I've been there. And I find that in the Free State, even Black people speak Afrikaans very well. It's almost like their second language. So I have no problems with communicating. And whatever initiatives or projects or whatever, even in the course of work, language has never been a problem. I would love to be able to learn Sotho, and I started in 2019 with taking a course, but then as I said, COVID interrupted and it doesn't, well, my colleagues sort of jokingly speak to me in Sotho, and then because one or two of them knew about it and they translate. So in that way, informally, I'm trying to upskill myself as far as that is concerned. But language has never been a problem because I speak Afrikaans, and I find that even with Black people in the Free State, they speak Afrikaans very well.
Okay, just a follow up. You know, the question why I'm asking that question is because it looks like as much as you are judges, you need to reach out to communities.
Oh, absolutely.
You know? And I'm
absolutely.
wondering, the communities that the MEC is talking about actually is not the African speaking or English speaking communities. So and especially as a senior judge, we need to lead. I always expect more from women.
Yes.
You know, to reach out to communities, to reach out to, you know, in issues of gender violence or whatever. But that's why I'm asking that question. Are you able to do what is expected of you to go out to communities and speak to people about the issues that affect them?
I've actually done that even in KZN. And it is, I think it's the will. And through the work of the IWJ, we had done that extensively in KZN. And now in the Free State, we've got a mentoring program going with professionals, the like, young attorneys, magistrates, law students, and even high school students. And we have to, well, they speak English usually, but we normally, where it's a problem, we always have an interpreter so that we are able to get across whatever it is that we're doing. So through the work of the IWJ, we have been doing that, reaching out. And in KZN, we did it very extensively.
Just the last follow-up. I'm not talking about young attorneys or young legal professionals. I'm saying to communities.
Communities.
That's why.
Yes, well, look, as far as I know, the magistrates do go out. With judges, it's a little bit, it's a bit difficult sometimes with work commitments and so on. But with communities, I think there's been outreach with regard to, for instance, raising awareness of bail, the purpose of bail and what the whole issue of bail is. Because just because somebody is accused or charged doesn't mean he does not qualify for bail. And we have to explain the purpose of bail. What is the purpose of bail? It's not to punish, but to ensure that the person stands trial. So it's issues like that, maintenance, for instance, succession, you know, where there's somebody dies without a will, those issues, yes.
Thank you, CJ, and thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Madolo Lebu. Honorable Magwanisha.
Thank you very much, CJ. Good afternoon, Judge.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Thank you. Now, taking from what Commissioner Lucas has raised, what will be your advice to us, given the fact that in respect of the other allegation of you wanted 2 data lines, you wanted to claim for 2 data lines instead of 1. It is still under investigation.
I'm not aware if that's still under investigation.
That is the...
Is that part? You see, I'm not aware of that. I was not even aware what this investigation was about. But as far as that is concerned, it was resolved. And the court manager, in fact, advised me what to do, which I'm now implementing because I'm due for an upgrade on my contract. And I'm taking into account what she's asked me to do. So I don't know that that was part of an investigation.
Yes, because the document before me is that the investigation is still going on. And my question based on that, if we were to discuss, because we have to deliberate about the suitability of the candidates, if indeed the investigation is still going on, what would you advise us to do with respect to your suitability?
Well, I have responded to the issue that was raised. In my mind, it was suitably resolved, and there was no further reason or no reason to take it further. It was resolved, and I have absolutely no inclination to deal further. She's explained it, I've understood it, and I'm implementing what she's asked me to do. So I really don't know what the investigation is about. But with regard to that issue, between us, it's been resolved.
Yes, sorry, Chief Justice. I mean, if we can establish that there is an investigation,
Okay.
because that is what is the document before us, that there is an investigation you are not aware of. But if there is that investigation and we have to deliberate now, immediately after you leave the room, what do you suggest we should do in case there is that investigation?
Well, if the investigation is ongoing, it would be with regard to the conduct of the court manager, I'm assuming, because I'm not involved in that. or no inputs were obtained from me with regard to that incident. I have given my response. I do not believe that that investigation would in any way bear upon my suitability. I resolved that between us. I don't intend taking it further. As I said, that may well be an investigation if you look at the fact that her immediate supervisor got involved in this matter, which was so trivial. How and by whom, I don't know. I was equally surprised. So, and that was completely unnecessary in my view for her supervisor to have become involved. So from that point of view, even though there's an investigation, I believe it doesn't bear on my suitability.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Magwanishe. Commissioner Tsepe,
Mr. Chair,
sorry,
can you please add me to the list?
I will say, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
CJ, just before you move to the next one, I just have a small follow-up to this issue that Honorable Magwanishe raised. It's a very small one. Don't take that.
Okay, JP, go ahead.
Thank you. Judge, are you aware, you're one of the senior members of the Free State Bench. Are you aware if there are other complaints filed against a judge by a member of staff, especially the court manager?
Well, in that letter, it was Judge Opperman, in the letter that she sent regarding the circuit court. But whether she's taken that up as a complaint, I'm not aware.
Other complaints against other judges?
I'm not aware, no.
Okay. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, JP. Commissioner Tsepe.
Thank you, CJ. Good afternoon, Judge.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Judge, in response to the question from, a follow-up question from Mr. Madontela about your contribution to the division, you said that there are areas of improvement. You firstly said that there are systems in place at the division, and we have heard, in fact, from the other judges who've come before us, particularly in relation to two matters I raised about a system of allocation, an equitable system of allocation of work to judges, and the other was a system relating to timeous delivery, ensuring that there is timeous delivery of judgments. You said that there are areas of improvement. I wanted to find out from you where those areas and how would you improve in those areas?
Well, the first one was this issue of communication. I was not aware that we had a problem, but it seems that we do. I do think, though, that it is confined to that one person. And I believe one-on-one interactions will resolve that. Generally, communication is no problem. The other areas is just operational issues. For instance, the filing in our general office, but mostly it's not so much the fault of the clerks. What happens is our matters get allocated to us ahead of the time. Trial matters, our opposed motions, and so on. And attorneys then come and file documents at a late stage after the roll for that particular day has closed. They don't inform the clerks, for instance, that this matter is already on the roll, or it is most likely with the judge. The clerk has no idea what to do with that document, and you don't blame the clerk for that. So I'd like to improve that, maybe by way of a letter from the JP to the profession to specify that this matter is on the roll or not yet on the roll, so that the clerk is aware and will know where to go and look to put that document, because that document could be important to the hearing, which often has happened in my case. So that is something I'd like to, it's just improving the flow of documentation to the office. As I said, the communication. The other thing that I've noticed increasingly now is that matters which fall within the jurisdiction of the magistrates court and regional court are more and more being brought to the High Court. And I'm very alive to the fact that a litigant has the choice of forum. But we need to interrogate how that impacts on access to justice. And I had a case last week, I think it was, where a big, very big national and multinational company had an application brought against it by a member of the public. But it was a matter that's happened in Sasolburg, which is about 3.5 hours away from Bloemfontein. The respondent, being the big company, was able to brief to counsel to come and appear. And the applicant, who is unemployed at this point, had to struggle to get to the High Court. And he said he just didn't have the money, and he's sorry that he couldn't file his documents. He had not filed the replying papers, and he said he just simply did not have money to go and see a lawyer. He needs time to get legal aid. Now, that made me think, where's the access to justice to this person? In matters like that, it could have been brought in the regional court, for instance, in Sasolburg. Then he would have had access. So it's that, and it is a bit of a sensitive point, because a litigant generally has the choice, and you can't interfere too much with that choice. And I know my JP holds the same view, but perhaps we can discuss a way forward with regard to that.
Thank you, Judge. The last question relates to another area you raised, which is upskilling of junior judges. You said currently it's informally done. Is there a plan to have that formalized? And if so, how would you go about it?
Well, sometime last year, the JP, during one of my acting stints as DJP, raised that with me, and he said, can we put something in place? For example, a Wednesday. Let's do something on a Wednesday at lunchtime. Now we have well, before COVID, we had a wonderful system where judges would gather in the tea room for lunch. You bring your own little lunchbox, or sometimes we felt like ordering in, and everybody would order in. And it was a very cordial kind of gathering. So the JP was looking at tapping into something like that, and also having, as part of that gathering, a training initiative. Even if we started simple with just bringing to the attention of colleagues new legislation that's been amended that affects us. I think it's been put in place already. The JP has spoken to the registrar, the chief registrar, and from time to time she sends us emails to say, this is an amendment, this is going to affect our work, and so on. So it is there in place, but I think perhaps if we can formalize it, but the training and the upskilling, certainly, I would like to see that happening. I know he would, but we have to find a way of how to do it. COVID is simply, it's just not possible right now. But for the future, I do think that that would be quite helpful, given the fact that we have quite a young bench. And you know, the succession plan that one of the other commissioners, I think it was Commissioner Madonsela, spoke about, would become a lot easier then, and it would be a clearer path.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tsepe. Commissioner Barnard.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Judge Naidoo.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
I just want to clarify something that I'm uncertain about. Judge JP Musi asked you about or referred to 3 judgments outstanding, 2 for 78 days and 1 for 46 days. And then you explained that before you delivered one of the judgments, you realized there was something omitted and then rectified that, which is a good thing. But I'm not sure the other two judgments, because he mentioned three, and I'm not sure whether you were responding in respect of all three in that question.
All those judgments from that time have all been delivered, yes.
Thank you. But the fact that you put it on the form, you explained that you
I
didn't
thought it
put it
was
on.
going to be delivered, yes, and I had to hold it back.
Thank you.
Honorable Singh.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice, and good afternoon, Justice Naidoo.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Thank you. I'm going to take advantage of the fact that you served in the family courts in Durban, and just to say that I think the minister was very proud recently when he opened a new state-of-the-art family court in Durban, which in terms of infrastructure must be a far cry from when you were there. But for me, it's not the infrastructure which is important, but it's more important. Do you think from your experience that those that are sexually and violently abused, particularly women and children, are receiving the kind of respect and attention that they should receive when they become victims, by starting from reporting the matter at a police station right up to the court level? What can be done to improve things? And do you have such kind of cases in abundance in the Free State? And have you had to sit in judgment in any one of these cases, which has been significant? Thank you.
Well, you're right about the infrastructure. It really was, it left a lot to be desired in those days. We, as magistrates, had to be very resourceful and look at how we could improve the lot of the people that came there to the family courts. And I was quite pleased when one of the magistrates sent me the notification that a new family court for Durban was opened. With regard to, it is problematic. Your question with regard to whether there are still problems in the way victims of violence, and especially sexual violence, are dealt with. I don't know, that is not dealt with at a very great level at the High Court level. I do still have contact with magistrates and some of them in the Free State. There was a center for dealing with abused women especially. And I understand from the Chief Magistrate that that's become too small. Their workload with regard to that has increased. They have a little office or a space in one of the local hospitals. And he said to me a few weeks ago, that is simply inadequate. We really need to look at getting bigger premises so that we can deal more effectively. So I'm guessing that at that level, it is still a problem, which is sad. They need to improve infrastructure, firstly, to accommodate cases like this. But training of police officials, training of social workers has to be ongoing because there is a staff turnover. And to this day, one gets reports that a victim goes to lay a charge, for instance, and they say, but it's a domestic matter, go to the domestic violence court. And that, for me, stems just from ignorance, because nothing prevents that complainant from opening a criminal charge, in addition to going and obtaining a protection order in the family courts and the domestic violence section. So I don't believe that it is as bad as it was, but certainly it needs improvement. And that is ongoing interactions and trainings, which I used to do when I headed the family courts. I had regular interactions with the various stakeholders, and especially the police. We really were running things quite smoothly. But as we know, police officials, they turn over, their duties in that office ends and they go somewhere else. So ongoing training for me is important, in addition to the infrastructure challenges that need to be addressed.
Just as a follow-up, knowing the very heavy load work that you'll have in your division, and I think other judges as well, have you individually volunteered to offer training to any levels, whether it's the police or the magistrates or social workers in this regard?
Yes, we are. We are. And I was invited by Nadal, I was invited by BLA to do part of their training, but with the police and that I think it's done at magistrates court level, not so much at high court level. I have indeed, to answer your question, I have indeed volunteered my services. The chief magistrate who is, I believe, on suspension now, and there's an acting chief magistrate, also are very keen for us as the High Court judiciary to get involved. And I think it must have been about a month ago when I had discussions with him. And he is now looking at ways in which we can interact with them. So if we, for instance, are called to one of their trainings, I would be more than happy to impart some of my knowledge and experience at that level. He's also very interested in us empowering magistrates. And I know they have in the magistrates court, which was even in place when I was still there, peer training or peer review workshops or sessions. It varies from court to court when and how they hold it. And I suggested to him that if they have these trainings, perhaps once a month you can invite a judge. The JP, I'm sure, will be very happy to volunteer services with judges. But I also said to him, as part of the Women Judges Association's outreach, we would be happy to also jointly liaise with the JP to put something like that in place.
Thank you, Judge Naidoo. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Honorable Singh. Honorable Dodovu.
Thank you, Honorable CJ. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
I've got one specific question. You are 7 years in the bench, and looking at your record, you are afforded an opportunity to state not more than 10 cases where you have written judgments. You only provided 3. You are afforded an opportunity to do the same. There is only one case that was reported over 7 years, your case, where judgments were unsuccessfully appealed. You are afforded 10 to state, you only stated 3. And where your judgments were successfully appealed, you only provided 2. What could be the problem? Over 7 years, given the experience of others, this is too little.
No, there are more. The problem was sourcing that information. It was a huge problem because we weren't getting feedback from, for instance, the SCA. And I did take that up with the chief registrar as well as our appeals clerk. And they couldn't provide me with that because there are many matters that I had permitted leave to, or granted leave to appeal. And I was wanting to follow up what happened with these matters. We couldn't source it, unfortunately, at that time because I was on circuit and I was not at my office. And we always have problems with our emails and internet when you're on circuit. So I wasn't able to source that information, and I was asking the registrar to help me. And she herself said she's tried, even our researchers, both of our researchers said, I've got all these judgments, but I don't know what the results were. So they have now put in place a system to assist us with that.
I will have to follow up this one, Chief Justice. You were appointed in 2014 in the Free State.
Yes.
And you can't source the information in the Free State where you are the acting deputy judge president.
Yes, there was a problem.
And linked to that, these are your judgments, Justice, are your judgments. You should remember them.
I have my judgments. I understood you to ask which ones have been overturned and which ones have been upheld.
In this instance, you should because these are your judgments.
Yes, I have my judgments. I just don't know what happened with them after I'd granted leave to appeal, for instance. That report back was the problem. You grant leave to appeal and you don't hear about it. That's the problem. Where it was a full bench decision in our court, yes, that I could have. And the only one that was overturned was the Mashinini and Boa one. That was a full bench decision in our court. But where it went to the Supreme Court of Appeal, if it went to the Supreme Court of Appeal, is not information that was readily forthcoming. And we even tried the registrar at the SCA, and they said, well, we don't keep a register, we just send it off. And our office didn't keep that kind of register. They do have it now, so they are able to, judge by judge, file those outcomes that come from the SCA. Okay. So that was the challenge I had at that time.
CJ, I will have to leave by my short. I said one question, but I have many. It's okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Dodovu. Honorable JP Mlambo.
Thank you, CJ. I'll pass.
Thank you. Judge, I just need clarification. You had 3 judgments reserved. The reason you have stated for not having disclosed that reality was that regarding one of them, there was information that was inadvertently left out. It could not therefore be delivered on time because that information had to be included. What about the other 2?
They were delivered.
So they were not outstanding when you completed the form, the questionnaire?
No.
Okay, I just needed to get that clear because there was no clarity. Thank you so much, Judge. You're excused.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you.